AITAH for telling my daughter she will have to move out of my house if I get divorced because of her lies after her stepdad saw her naked. Throwaway account because this situation is too sensitive, and I really need an outside perspective. I'm honestly in turmoil, especially because my family has been blowing up my phone, calling me all sorts of names and accusing me of being a terrible mother for not taking my daughter's side. I've been second-guessing myself constantly, so I need to lay everything out here to see if I truly am in the wrong. For context, my husband and I have been married for a little over 5 years now. I'll admit, the dynamic between him and my daughter, who's 19 now, hasn't been picture perfect, but it's never been bad either. They've always had a cordial relationship, more of a mentor or advice giver type of bond than anything deeply familial. My daughter respects him, and he's always treated her well. I've never once picked up on anything inappropriate or weird from him toward her. On her end, my daughter has never mentioned feeling uncomfortable or expressed any concerns. If she had, I'd like to believe I'd have addressed it immediately. Now to what happened. It was Thursday night. My husband and I had settled into the living room to watch a movie. It had been a long week, so it was one of those cozy nights where we just wanted to relax and unwind together. We picked a thriller, I think, and were about halfway through the film when he got up to use the bathroom. I paused the movie as he left the room. The living room isn't far from the bathroom, so I could hear everything clearly. A few seconds later, I heard him knock on the bathroom door. It was a very clear, deliberate knock, 3 loud raps. There was a pause, and then I heard him knock again, exactly the same way. Another 3 knocks. What happened next was absolute chaos. Suddenly, I heard my daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. Not just shouting, full-blown screaming. I bolted up from the couch, my heart racing, and rushed toward the bathroom. The scene I walked into is burned into my mind. My daughter was standing there completely naked, covering herself with her hands, yelling at my husband to get out. My husband, meanwhile, was stumbling backwards so quickly he tripped over his own feet and nearly fell, fumbling to pull the door shut behind him. His face was bright red, and he looked utterly mortified. I was standing there, frozen for a second, not entirely sure what to do or say. My daughter was visibly shaking and furious, still yelling. My husband was stammering, trying to apologize and explain himself, saying he thought the bathroom was empty. He kept saying, "I knocked. I swear I knocked," over and over again. My first instinct was to calm the situation down because emotions were running so high, and nothing productive was going to happen while everyone was shouting. After managing to get my daughter into her room and giving her some space to cool down, I sat my husband down to figure out what had just happened. He explained that he had knocked twice on the bathroom door, waited both times, and didn't hear a response. Assuming the bathroom was empty, he opened the door, only to find my daughter standing in front of the mirror, completely naked. He said he was so startled that he panicked and immediately tried to back out, but she started screaming before he could even react properly. I then went to check on my daughter to hear her side of the story. She was understandably still upset, and it took some time for her to calm down enough to talk. She told me she had been in the bathroom changing clothes and had no idea my husband was outside or that he had knocked. I asked her how she didn't hear him knock because I clearly heard it from the living room, and she admitted she had her AirPods in and was listening to music while getting dressed. That detail seemed to clear up part of the confusion, but it didn't make her any less upset. She said it was inappropriate for him to walk in without being 100% sure the bathroom was empty. I told her that he had knocked and assumed it was fine to enter since there was no response. She countered that he should have waited longer or knocked louder. At that point, I explained that the whole situation seemed like a misunderstanding. I reassured her that her stepfather wasn't trying to invade her privacy or make her uncomfortable, and that he genuinely thought the bathroom was unoccupied. She still seemed upset but nodded, saying she understood. Later, my husband apologized to her directly, telling her how sorry he was for walking in and explaining his thought process. She seemed to accept his apology and even gave him a hug, saying she was sorry for yelling at him. Update 1. Throwaway account, here again. I wish I could say things got better after my first post, but unfortunately, the situation has taken an even messier turn, and I'm at my wits' end trying to figure out how to handle this. I honestly feel like I'm living in some sort of bizarre soap opera, and I don't know how to fix the damage that's been done. After the initial incident, I thought we were moving past it. My husband apologized, my daughter accepted it, and while things were a little tense for a few days, it seemed like everyone was ready to let it go. Or so I thought. Then the calls started coming in. First, it was a cousin, then my mother, and then my sister. Each call was worse than the last, with family members berating me for not kicking my husband out and accusing him of being a creep. My sister was particularly harsh, calling me irresponsible and telling me I was choosing my husband over my daughter. She even said she wouldn't let her kids come to my house anymore because she didn't feel they'd be safe around him. That one stung more than I cared to admit. At first, I was completely blindsided. I kept asking everyone why they thought my husband had done something wrong when it was clearly an accident. But then my sister dropped a bombshell. She said my daughter told her that my husband had deliberately walked into the bathroom despite her telling him she wasn't there. She said my daughter claimed she had answered him when he knocked and that he ignored her and barged in to look at her. Those were her exact words. I was floored. None of this matched up with what my daughter had told me or what I'd witnessed myself. I couldn't understand why she would say such a thing. After that call, I immediately went to talk to my daughter. I needed to get to the bottom of this. I sat her down and calmly asked her what she had told my sister. At first, she denied saying anything, insisting that she hadn't spoken to anyone about the situation. But her body language was off. She wouldn't meet my eyes, and she was fidgeting with her hands. I pressed her, asking how my sister could know the details of what happened if she hadn't said anything. She finally admitted that she had talked to her cousin, my sister's daughter, about the incident. Apparently, during their conversation, she made up scenarios about what could have happened if my husband had bad intentions. She claimed she was just venting and didn't mean for it to be taken seriously. I felt my stomach drop. It was bad enough that she'd been careless with her words, but the fact that she had even entertained the idea that my husband might have had ulterior motives felt like a betrayal. This was the man who had helped raise her for the past 5 years. He had never once given her or anyone else reason to question his character. And now, because of her thoughtless comments, my family was convinced he was some kind of predator. I couldn't let this stand. I told her that what she had done was incredibly irresponsible and hurtful, not just to my husband but to me as well. I told her she needed to come clean and set the record straight with our family. At first, she resisted, insisting that she hadn't lied because she never outright accused him of anything. But to me, there's no difference. Her words had caused real damage, and she needed to take accountability for that. At this point, I knew I needed solid proof to clear my husband's name. Thankfully, we have security cameras in our hallway that show the bathroom door. While they don't have audio, the footage clearly shows my husband knocking twice on the door before entering. You can see him pause after each knock, waiting for a response, and then opening the door after no one answered. The footage aligns perfectly with what he and I both heard and contradicts the story my daughter told her cousin. When I showed her the footage, she started crying and apologizing. She admitted that she had exaggerated the story while talking to her cousin and that she hadn't thought about how it might be interpreted. She said she was just upset and venting and didn't mean for it to get back to the adults in the family. I asked her why she felt the need to spin a different version of events in the first place. She couldn't give me a clear answer, just that she was embarrassed and angry at the time and wanted to talk it out with someone. She kept saying she didn't think it would go this far and that she was sorry for causing so much trouble. Her apology felt hollow, though. The damage was already done. My sister had told half the family by this point, and no one was interested in hearing the truth. When I tried to explain to them what really happened and even offered to show the camera footage, they dismissed it. They said the lack of audio was convenient and accused me of covering for my husband. Some even suggested that my daughter was too scared to tell the full truth because of how I might react. It's like I'm stuck in a nightmare where no one believes me or my husband, no matter how much evidence I provide. Now, The situation at home is tense, to say the least. My husband is heartbroken. He's always tried so hard to be a good stepfather to my daughter, and now he feels like she's painted him as a villain. He's been quieter than usual, withdrawing from both of us. I can tell he's hurt and doesn't know how to move forward. I think she realizes the gravity of what she's done, but I don't know if she fully understands the long-term consequences. The trust between her and my husband is shattered, and I don't know if it can ever be repaired. As for me, I feel stuck in the middle, trying to mediate between my husband and my daughter, while also dealing with the fallout from my extended family. I feel like I'm being judged from all sides, and no matter what I do, someone is going to think I'm in the wrong. I'm furious with my daughter for putting us in this position, but I'm also trying to be compassionate because I know she's young and still learning. At the same time, I feel like I've failed my husband by not protecting him from this mess. I don't know how to move forward. Do I keep trying to fix things with my family, or do I just let them believe what they want? How do I rebuild trust between my husband and daughter? And how do I forgive my daughter for causing all this pain? I just want my family to feel whole again, but I don't even know where to start. Update 2. Throwaway account again. I honestly don't know where to begin. I'm exhausted, angry, heartbroken, and at a complete loss for how my life has spiraled so out of control. The situation I wrote about before has only escalated, and now it feels like my marriage is on the brink of collapse, all because of one careless mistake and a chain of lies that snowballed into something I never could have imagined. I feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare I can't wake up from, and no matter what I do, someone is going to end up hurt. Yesterday was one of the worst days of my life. My phone didn't stop ringing all day. Calls, texts, and even social media messages from family members came pouring in, one after the other. The story about what happened had spread like wildfire through the family, but of course, it wasn't the truth. It was the twisted version my daughter had spun in her venting session with her cousin, the one where my husband supposedly ignored her protests and walked into the bathroom deliberately. I can't even describe the things people were saying about my husband. Words like predator and creep were being thrown around, and there were accusations that made my stomach turn. People were questioning my judgment, accusing me of choosing my husband over my daughter, and even saying that I was complicit in some kind of abuse. The worst part is that my husband was seeing these messages too. At first, he tried to brush it off, saying it was just family drama and it would blow over, but as the day went on and the messages kept coming, I could see it was getting to him. He's always been a quiet, reserved man who values his reputation and integrity above all else. To have his character attacked like this, especially by people who know him, was devastating for him. He kept pacing the house, checking his phone, and shaking his head in disbelief. I could see the pain in his eyes, but he didn't want to talk about it. He just kept saying he needed space to think. Meanwhile, I sat my daughter down again, determined to make her understand the magnitude of what she had done. I pulled up the endless messages and comments I had been receiving, showing her one by one. Each text seemed to sting worse than the last, family members calling my husband a creep, accusing him of predatory behavior, and questioning how I could possibly stay with him after what had happened. I scrolled through the messages slowly, making sure she read every word, hoping that seeing the real impact of her actions would snap her out of her denial. I explained, as calmly as I could manage, that this wasn't just family gossip, this was the destruction of a man's character, someone who had done nothing to deserve it. I told her that the situation was entirely her doing and that she needed to take responsibility before it ruined our family completely, but instead of the realization I was hoping for, she refused. She sat there shaking her head, saying over and over again that she hadn't spread the story. She insisted that she only told her cousin and that if anyone was to blame for the gossip getting out of control, it wasn't her, it was her cousin, her aunt, anyone but herself. She clung to this narrative like a lifeline, repeating that it wasn't her fault. And then, to my absolute disbelief, she said that it didn't matter because everyone knew my husband wasn't like that and the whole thing would blow over eventually. Her refusal to take action, to acknowledge the gravity of what she had done, sent me over the edge. I could feel the frustration boiling over inside me as I tried to make her see the reality of the situation. I told her that she was being selfish and cowardly by refusing to own up to her lies. I reminded her, point by point, that it was her careless exaggerations and fabricated scenarios that had caused this mess in the first place. I laid out exactly how her words had snowballed into an avalanche of accusations and cruelty aimed at my husband. But it was like I was speaking to a brick wall. She just sat there, hunched over, her face streaked with tears, repeating the same refrain. She hadn't meant for this to happen. She didn't want people to think badly of her. She never thought it would go this far. It was infuriating. She was so wrapped up in her own fear of being judged that she couldn't or wouldn't see the damage she had done to someone else. It was as if her own discomfort and shame were the only things that mattered to her, and the devastation she had caused for my husband was an afterthought, if that. I couldn't understand how she could sit there, crying over how she might be perceived, while the man she had essentially framed was being vilified and ostracized. Her focus was entirely inward, on herself and her fear, rather than on the man whose life and reputation she had shattered. It was selfish in a way I didn't know she was capable of, and it broke something in me to see her like that. Things finally came to a head last night, and it was the most excruciating moment I've experienced in this entire ordeal. My husband had been eerily quiet all day. He barely said a word to me or my daughter, retreating into himself in a way I've never seen before. It wasn't just sadness, it was a deep, profound hurt that seemed to weigh on him physically, like he was carrying the burden of every accusation and judgment alone. He spent most of the day in our bedroom, and I could hear the faint sounds of drawers opening and closing, the shuffle of clothing being packed into a suitcase. I didn't want to believe what it meant. Part of me kept hoping he would come out, ready to talk things through or at least let me comfort him, but that moment never came. When he finally emerged, the sight of him with his suitcase in hand hit me like a ton of bricks. He looked so defeated, like a man who had been stripped of his dignity and couldn't bear to stay in a place where he felt so wronged. He walked into the living room and stood there for a moment, the weight of his decision hanging heavily in the air. Then he said, with heartbreaking finality, that he was going to stay with his parents for a while. He explained that he couldn't handle being in the middle of this mess anymore, that he didn't want to live in a house where he felt vilified for something he didn't do. He spoke calmly, but there was a raw pain in his voice that made it clear how deeply this had affected him. He said he needed space from the accusations, from the judgment, from the environment that had turned into a place of suspicion and hurt instead of the home it once was. I begged him not to leave. I pleaded with him to stay, to give us a chance to fix this together, but he was resolute. He said he needed to clear his head and figure out what to do next. There was no anger in his voice, no blame, just a quiet resignation that broke my heart even more. This wasn't the man I knew, the man who was always so steady, so full of warmth and patience. This was someone who had been pushed to his limit, who had been stripped of his sense of safety and trust in the very place he should have felt most secure. When my daughter saw him standing there with his suitcase, something in her snapped. She completely broke down, collapsing to her knees in the middle of the living room floor. She sobbed uncontrollably, her cries so loud and guttural that they echoed through the house. Between her gasping breaths, she kept apologizing over and over again, begging him not to go. Her words tumbled out in a frantic stream, promises to fix everything, to make it all right, to undo the damage she had caused. She reached for him, clutching at his arm like she could physically keep him there if she just held on tightly enough. It was like watching her unravel in real time, and for a moment, I thought he might stay. But it was too late. My husband gently pulled away from her grip, his expression unreadable, and looked at me with a kind of sorrow I can't put into words. He kissed me on the forehead, told me he loved me, and walked out the door. The sound of the door closing behind him was deafening, like a final punctuation mark on everything that had happened. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door long after he had gone, my mind racing with everything I should have said or done to stop him. My chest felt hollow, like my heart had been ripped out and replaced with a gaping void. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the reality that my husband, the man who had been my partner, my rock, had left because of this. My daughter's cries pulled me out of my daze. She was still on the floor, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with the force of her sobs. In that moment, all I wanted to do was scream at her, to unleash all the anger and frustration and heartbreak I was feeling. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage was already done, and yelling at her wouldn't bring my husband back or undo what had happened. Instead, I turned to her, my voice as cold and firm as I could make it. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that if this situation led to a divorce, she would be moving out of my house. I wasn't going to lose a good man, a man who loved me, who cared for me, who had done nothing wrong because of her lies and selfishness. I reminded her that she wasn't a child anymore, that she was old enough to understand the consequences of her actions, and that she needed to take responsibility for the mess she had created. I told her that she had to fix this on her own, that I wasn't going to clean up her mess for her. She had caused this, and it was up to her to make it right. She begged me to help her, saying she didn't know how to fix it, but I stood firm. I told her this was her mess, and she needed to own it. I didn't care how uncomfortable or scared she felt she had created this situation, and now she had to face the consequences. Watching her cry, seeing the raw panic and regret on her face, didn't move me. I was too angry, too hurt, and too exhausted to feel any sympathy. All I could think about was my husband walking out the door, and how this all could have been avoided if she had just told the truth from the beginning. The rest of the night was a blur. My daughter was inconsolable, crying so hard that she could barely breathe. I locked myself in my room because I couldn't stand to look at her or hear her sobbing. I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions: anger, sadness, guilt, frustration, and sheer exhaustion. I kept replaying everything in my head, wondering how it had come to this and what I could have done differently to prevent it. But no matter how many times I went over it, I always came back to the same conclusion. This was my daughter's mess, and she needed to fix it. This morning, I woke up to more messages from family members, some of them even more cruel than before. My sister sent me a long text saying I was a terrible mother for letting my husband stay in the house for as long as I did and accusing me of not providing a safe space for my daughter. She said I was choosing a man over my own child and that she was done speaking to me until I got my priorities straight. I didn't even bother responding. I'm too tired to keep defending myself to people who have already made up their minds. I don't know if I'm the AITAH here, but I'm not going to give up. I'll try to fix everything. I want my husband to come back to me.